I even, that inquest I attended uh, with Lydia, that we went to support the mother, and it was a post-states, and it was a birth center that has since closed. And it actually, I won't go into the whole thing, but it was clear that the midwives were at fault, and the jurors, there's 6 at the inquest in South Carolina. They actually returned a verdict of, now Lee said, oh, it's going to be accidental. And I said, I don't know. I saw those jurors. We heard the evidence. I said it would be homicide, and it was homicide. So the inquest returned a verdict of homicide, but the prosecutor said, well, I'm not going to charge. So these women, they're still doing their center closed. They just delivered home.
Could I ask?
And nothing happened to them, and all their supporters, all these pregnant women were sitting in the back. And we just wondered, after they heard that, how many went through with it and how many went to find an OB. We just don't know.
Could I ask Bambi, because she had problems with her last 2 pregnancies, yes, due to ISO immunization? That should have been the last one. What, did Mary Beth have any issues along those lines or not?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, but you knew it happened with Ireland. Wait, so what's your last daughter's name?
Actually, my daughter Ireland is now my son Kai. He's transitioned.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, that's new. Congratulations.
Yeah, but what happened with your last pregnancy was something that a lay midwife probably would not have picked up at all.
No, she did no testing whatsoever.
How did you? How were the problems with your last pregnancy caught? Do you remember?
Blood work. Just routine blood work, and they found the ISO immunization,
which lay midwives don't do.
That's how they find. They don't.
Not here.
No, that's how they confirm ICP. Usually have itching though before, but that's how they confirm ICP.
Yep. See, learning new things. Oh yeah, and they don't do any testing at home, like at all. That's why I was surprised with the checks, like with the cervical checks, because I know a lot of women that they never have got a cervical check ever, like until they maybe had home births and then went to a hospital, then they've had cervical checks. But
the home birth community hates those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to say part of that has to do with that the midwives don't have the training for it, to be completely honest. I think part of it is that they push this scary view of it, like it's bad, it's wrong, it's invasive. But I think it also goes down to the midwife really doesn't know. She can't actually do a cervical check. So she would rather manipulate you to say, like, let's just not do a cervical check. Like, that's so invasive. And that's what doctors do, Right. So that's how I kind of feel about it, because I thought I had a nurse midwife. And so she kind of pushed me away from it too. Like, oh, we don't need to. It was kind of whatever. And then later it's like, maybe I should have got this stuff done because I was like way overdue. And if I would have been 40 weeks or 41 weeks instead of reaching 42 and been checked out and been like, dude, you're not dilating. Like, we need to like work on this. Like, you're way overdue and not dilating. Then I probably would have been like, okay, let's get this show on the road because I don't want to be pregnant forever. And I think it would have made a difference,
Yeah. I had it might have been a near miss. I don't know. But I went to 41 weeks and I was 3 centimeters for a month. And I had a history of vaginal birth. But my doctor, he was aware that I wanted a natural birth, and he was, and he was on my side, and if he probably would have suggested, hey, come in and we'll break your water, I'm sure I would have said no. He might have even asked me that, and I said no. I can't remember. This is 25 years ago, but I could have, and I could have. Maybe my son actually had a lot of meconium. They had to call the NICU team when they realized that, and I was. And the doctor was doing the same thing as in the movie, push now. And I was like, hey, I'm like, wait, can I wait? Push now. Because I was like, now that when it changed from the pain to the pressure, I was like, okay, I'm going to rest a while. No, and they he had made the nurses pull my legs back, and that's why, same reason. But luckily he was there, and then I guess they have a button or something. The NICU team is there, and he was fine. He had a low Apgar, but then he was fine. But I'm like, gee, because I was sort of, going to the late J League meetings. Some of them had home births. It's just, I was in that mindset. But still, you might have even been able to had membrane stripping, or, let's get it started with breaking your water. Let's give a little bit, because they're really, now that I've known so much more than I did then when I was younger, it's just those just help you get to a vaginal birth.
Yeah.
Because if they really wanted to give you a C-section, they just say, okay, let's just go right to the OR. But they don't. They say, let's do this. Let's try all these things that they hate. Then the reason they hate them is they can't do them at home. The midwife can't give you Pitocin except illegally. The midwife doesn't know how to break your water safely. The midwife doesn't have an epidural to give you, They can't do those things. They can only have a tub rental business. So they make money off, and that's the whole thing. That's what it is. It is a business, like Madison said. That is their business.
Yeah.
And I learned about the bulb afterwards. When I got my C-section, all that stuff happened. When I went to my appointments later, I was actually told if I had gone in, because I was dilating, and I was having. We were pretty sure my baby was coming, but it started getting more random. And so it was really I was getting 4 minutes apart, I think. And then it started just getting kind of all over the place. And I was told by that doctor that if I would have came in, he would give me a bulb. And I then learned about this Foley bulb, I think it's called. And he was
I could have had that. See, I could have had
he was like,
you would have been a great candidate.
Yeah, he's like, I wouldn't give you medicine, nothing. He wouldn't have anything. You get the Foley bulb, we try it out, whatever. And he's like, you would have had, and he told me, because I wanted a water birth. He's like, yeah, you would have had a water birth. And I was like, why didn't I know you before? I was like, you would have been the perfect doctor. But yeah, I didn't know. There was a lot of things that he told me afterwards, that was the options that I had that I just didn't know existed.
It's funny that you say that, because the doctor who wound up taking me on when my son passed away. Now, I know that my son was dead before the ambulance was ever called. So there was really no hope for them to even try to save him in the OR. I know they tried to work on him for 30 minutes and it didn't work. But the doctor who was the OB who did my surgery, he came in the next day to speak with me. And he even started talking about since this was my second C-section, he was like, I would still support you if you wanted to try for a vaginal birth after 2 C-sections with these stipulations. You are in a hospital, you're this, you're that. And the fact that this man was able to on his feet think that I don't think I'll ever go for a vaginal birth again. It's going to take, someone would have to literally be I don't even know what it would take. Cut it open and get the baby out.
Right.
The fact that he even said to me, this is what professional training and what doctors are that midwives lack, is on his feet in the craziest moment ever. He was like, I knew vaginal birth was important to you, so I made sure to stack your new scar on top of your old scar so you don't have multiple weak points. And he came in and was like, these are the regulations, why we want to do it the way we want to do it, and how we could protect you next time if that's the path you choose. And I'm like, even when I went in to meet with my midwife and I was like, here's all the things that led to my daughter being a C-section in 2017, she couldn't give me even answers about why any of those things led to a C-section. So I'm like,
well, they just blame it on the doctor. They didn't wait, like the infamous Ina May, failure to wait. Hashtag failure to wait.
Uninterrupted birth.
Yeah.
I actually look back a lot on how, when I got pregnant the second time, how the midwifery team, and again, early on, I saw a couple, like I said, the midwives on that team were split down the middle, and some were way more science-minded than others, even though they all carried the same credential. And I saw some of the ones that were a little more into the woo early on, and they saw me and they did the consultation about my first pregnancy. And they really fed into my belief. Like I had some pre-existing belief about this. Cause again, at this point, I still believed that the worst, I really did believe that like the worst common thing to happen was just to end in a C-section. Like that was my worst case scenario. Like this would be terrible if I had a C-section. So when I had a C-section with my firstborn, I did feel, so I didn't like my recovery and I was really uncomfortable. And so I was like, anything I can do to avoid that recovery, awful. So when I met and did the consultation with them, now that I look back on it and after my second delivery and discussing both deliveries with my really science-based OBGYN that I have now, everything that happened in my first delivery was perfectly handled and probably avoided disaster. They my water broke before I ever went into labor, and it had meconium in it then. And then I went on to have a very long labor, and I was stuck at like 1 centimeter forever. And I started, as the afternoon went on, being like 18, 19, 20 hours in labor at that point, started to get the chills, and I started feeling really under like the flu. I started to feel like I had the flu, shaking. I felt terrible. I felt so sick, and I was trying to hide it because I knew they were going to do something. And I was like, nope, I'm fine. I was worried they were going to give me a C-section. And sure enough, like the OB came in and she said, I think there's a lot of evidence that you guys have choreo at this point. And I think that your body has labored a long time with your water being broken and meconium, and you could probably go a little bit longer, but there's probably nothing else is going to happen. And it's better off to just have the C-section. And then when I had that consultation about my first birth with the midwives, they were just very much like apologetic of how that happened, how I should have gone longer, how eventually that baby probably would have been born fine. And they just rushed things along. And did they give you Pitocin too? Look at the cascade of interventions. They discussed all of that with me.
With choreo with choreo in labor.
Yeah.
Did your son spend any time in the NICU for that, or no?
Well, it was with my daughter that I had.
Oh, sorry. Let me get that straight.
No, that's okay. I had the daughter then the son. She went to, so the hospital that I was at for her was the next door one that doesn't have an official NICU, has a special care nursery. They did have her go to special care, and she got antibiotics, and we prophylactically both got antibiotics. I guess it really wasn't considered because we both had fevers and things, and they just assumed at that point. So we did get antibiotics. They told me that it might be like 7 or 10 days that she was going to be in special care, but she perked up pretty quick, and she was able to be back in my room like 12 hours later. And then we were discharged in the standard like 72-hour time frame, and she was okay. But I actually think in large part that was because my OB was conservative about it and was like, you're showing enough signs. Like she's not in any type of massive distress right now. You guys, you don't look well. You look like you're feeling terrible. And, your water has been broken a long time, and she's showing intermittent distress. It probably is just a good idea to not let's keep going. But because my recovery kind of sucked and I felt terrible for a while, I really did reflect, and I was like, and I didn't understand the seriousness of choreo, that how bad that could get if you let that keep going. And then I did. I had an echo chamber of people around that. I have enough people in the area that were like acquaintances of mine or family or things that kind of did have more natural birth ideologies kind of say to me like, oh, they probably jumped in kind of soon. I bet you would have delivered soon, and you probably could have and even the midwives. And the thing is, the midwives said that to me without like fully studying my chart yet or anything. Like they were just having conversation with me. So I think I expressed like disappointment in my delivery, but they still knew, like I told them.
And they jumped on it, of course. Oh, we're so sorry that happened to you.
Like, yeah, the likelihood of that, and the likelihood of that happening again is low. And so you're an ideal candidate, you're 20, at that time I was 27. So you're 27 and you're healthy, and that was 3 years ago. So this
didn't say something like, oh, having an infection either during or postpartum increases the risk of rupture.
Nope.
Yeah, it's just such a shame that the whole culture of that vaginal birth is such an attainment, and we see it, all the time in our Facebook group is oh, I have to have it. I never want to, I die if I have to have a C-section. Instead of the joy that you should feel that you were able to have a C-section and you have a healthy baby, and that you're also alive. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's just the history has been erased. I mean, if you know, there's so many stepmothers in fairy tales because of so many women dying in childbirth. You probably would have a stepmother and maybe a second stepmother, you know, it just, or you know, somebody in your family that died in childbirth, or who had a baby that didn't get enough oxygen and then maybe had to go to an institute. You know, you just don't.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that you should be celebrating that fact that I don't know. You know, if you think, and that's what we try. You know, try to talk about historical figures that died in childbirth and how they would have lived with a C-section.
That's so true.
You know, and that changed the course of history, of course, but and it really does. It's going to take somebody to have a select. Now in the social media, it's going to be a celebrity that has to have a tragedy at home.
It happened.
It happens though.
3 weeks after my son died, or a month after my son died, one of the girls from the Real Housewives lost a baby and shoulder dystocia home birth. And she went on Good Morning America and everything. And she was like, we were not working with midwives because COVID hit, because my son died February 24th, 2020. And then COVID restrictions in New York State were put into place Friday, the 13th of March. And then within a couple weeks, this woman in Los Angeles or Beverly Hills or something loses her baby in a home birth. And she got on Good Morning America early in COVID and was like, we chose to birth at home because we were convinced by this culture that the only way to protect our baby from the tragedy of COVID was to birth our baby at home. And then we go and we have this baby and he's overdue and he's big. I think he was upwards of 10 pounds and he got shoulder dystocia and he got stuck and he's dead. And it happened like...
Did they have it unassisted then?
No, they had a midwife and I believe she was a CNM.
Yes, that one was doubly tragic because her first pregnancy was done in a hospital, had shoulder dystocia with her daughter, I believe. And everyone lived. And then her second child, she had the midwife caring for him. She was carrying big. She wasn't told about it. They weren't concerned about the baby size. I think he was nearly 11 pounds. So he was even larger, previous history of shoulder dystocia. I don't think her daughter ended up in the NICU. I'd have to double check that. But yeah, she was definitely at risk. And her midwife apparently did not inform her of this.
And even as a celebrity, and she came out with and tried to kind of do somewhat of a PSA after that, like I was really duped. The natural community everybody still turned on her, even as a celebrity. Yeah. Narrative still shifted. She was still turned on. And so one of the things too, I was thinking back to our conversation, not to shift it back to, but I came to mind thinking of this is earlier we were talking about regulations. One of the things, so yes, New York is like highly regulated compared to some of the states you guys live in, like Madison and I were saying, but like the problem isn't even necessarily always the regulatory pieces. It's that even in a highly regulated state like New York, there's so many CPMs that fly under the radar too. And they have this army of natural childbirth fanatics that still back them. So and I think I've discussed her on here before, there is a midwife in New York that got arrested in 2018, but only after she committed like a slew of crimes, had a trail of dead babies behind her. They were largely unnoticed unfortunately, because they were in the Mennonite community and she served south of Rochester in a very rural area. And she was she was charged with 95 felony counts and forging doctors. She was getting scripts under a fake name, all sorts of things. But it took that level to even kind of have her be a blip on a radar. I mean, she's delivered hundreds of babies in these rural communities, and still with 95 felony counts, dead babies, her basically being predatory to a community that doesn't seek out a lot of medical care, and coming in and assuring them that she was safe for them and doing all of those things. Even after that, she has people that come to her courthouse hearings. Like that's dragging on. So she got arrested around Christmas of 2018. This past summer, she pled not guilty to all 95 counts of everything. So the state is still being set and keeps getting pushed back with COVID. So that's dragging on. Every single time there's something at the courthouse, there is a slew of people that still support her. They still paint it as you're taking options away from women in rural areas.
Completely unsafe.
They keep saying that. They keep painting New York State as a maternity care desert, which is so far from the truth. There's, even in the rural areas, there are decent hospitals that have really good protocols with the hospitals in Buffalo and in Rochester, where they can, mercy flight people to and get people in. Like, they have protocols established, and they still even have really decent hospitals in that area. They're as far from a desert of maternity care, and they still present it that way. And they have all of these supporters, so many supporters, and even the media, like people in USA Today and other places, still tried to paint sympathy for this woman. And she's being defended by like this guy who basically is this high profile defense attorney who defends like serial killers and hitmen. And that's who's representing her. And people are still like on her side. Go ahead, Madison. It blows my mind.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
That's one of the things. And that's why there's a stigma about being a home birth mother in society, whether or not you had, quote, successful home births, or your parents like us who have dealt with really the scariest and most tragic sides of what home birth can mean. But a lot of people who choose home birth don't naturally have that distrust of hospitals and things like that. Like, I come from a family that has a lot of nurses, a lot of doctors. My cousin and her boyfriend met each other in medical school, and they're both doing their residencies downstate right now. Like, my aunt was the dean of nursing for our local nursing school and stuff. So I have like a very deep respect for medical professionals. And that's why I chose the midwives that I chose, because they had those distinctions. They were medical professionals because it was owned by a CNM. And of the 3 midwives who were there, 2 were CNMs. And I was told your birth assistant will be a registered nurse. So I was like, okay, this is good. This is safe. I'm 4 minutes from a level 3 NICU. 4 minutes. When all came down to it, when they actually did make the phone call, if I'm not mistaken, it was 7 minutes from the time the phone call was made to me being in the hospital, and under 12 minutes from the phone call being made that they lost my son's heartbeat to the first incision of my C-section. So being in Buffalo, we're actually in an overly saturated market of medical professionals. We have specialized hospitals for so many things. We have 2 level 3 NICUs. We have 1 level 2 NICU. And it's still, with all of these safety nets that New York State and Erie County and Buffalo have worked so hard to put in place for all medical emergencies, the mentality of midwifery is get the baby out of the vagina at all costs. And they really, really mean at all costs. I think when they lost my son's heartbeat, I know for sure that, and this has been reported so it can actually be included in the video, it took 20 minutes. They lost my son's heartbeat and did not make the phone call for 20 minutes, despite me saying to call an ambulance. They, even after knowing they had probably a dead baby on their hands, fought and wanted my son to be born vaginally so that they never had to call the emergency services. And that's horrible.
Oh, yeah. I've heard, anecdotes where the midwife, we just suspect they know that. They do know it. They take a break. They compose themselves, they come back, and then it's like, oh my God, the baby, we don't know what happened. Everything was fine. And the baby was born not breathing. And they're just lying like a sack.
Yeah.
the rug because.
Well, in my and she actually asked me to switch positions. And she said, I can't get your baby's heartbeat from that position. I need you to move so that we can get pressure on a different part of your belly. And then she put the Doppler, because that's all they were using. There was no other technology involved. It was just the Doppler. She put the Doppler to my belly, and I myself saw the zeros on the Doppler, that there was no detectable heartbeat. And I said, call an ambulance. And 20 minutes later, like, they weren't even pretending they didn't know something was wrong. They left the room to go find an ultrasound machine so that they could diagnose death visually themselves before. And I'm like, that's
cold.
That is not. Yeah. That is not medical professionals.
Right.
I'm in a hospital visiting. When my grandmother used to be in the hospital all the time because she had terrible, terrible health. My grandmother's actually the reason why the idea of surgery scares me so much. My grandmother had a really hard time with surgery. But I remember she'd be in the ICU for like 3 or 4 weeks after any surgery she had. And every time you heard a code blue, the whole hospital rushes, and they, like, doctors don't care about holding their composure in the face of an emergency. They care about saving their patient. Mm-hmm. And in my situation, and what so many people have dealt with midwives, is midwives holding their composure instead of responding to it as an emergency. And that's why the movie was different. And my midwife actually wrote a blog post about the movie. She included that in there. She was like, this midwife was acting erratic and frazzled, and midwives aren't supposed to act. You have a dead baby.
Oh my God.
If there's ever a time for you to lose your cool, it is in the face of an emergency involving the death of somebody else's baby. That's when you've got to do something. Like, you really got to step it up.
You know what, though? I know from other mothers, and we've talked about this before, there's some type of level of, they want you to have the baby wherever you are, home or birth center. They want you to have the baby with no heartbeat. And part of that has to do with the lawsuits, because if the baby comes out breathing, the baby is a person. But if the baby's not breathing, the baby's not a person anymore. And so it has to do with the death certificate. In many states, we don't get death certificates for stillborns. They would prefer us to have our babies at home and not be alive by the time we transfer to a hospital. And unfortunately, like, I'm pretty sure I'm one of those situations. She knew stuff was wrong. And I think she thought eventually I would go into labor. And eventually, by the time he came out, maybe it would be good, maybe it would be bad, whatever. But if it was a stillborn, it was kind of like she could just sweep me under the rug. And I know other women right here in my area, in my state, other women in other states that have had the same thing. Heart rate, like, babies in distress, and they don't send it to the hospital because they want them to birth the baby at home. And then they end up going to the hospital, and now baby's already gone at this point. And then it's like, they go to the hospital. This has happened right here in Vegas too. They go to the hospital, baby's gone, and they're like pushing, well, just have your baby vaginally. But some of the mothers are like, I don't want to push out my baby. My baby's gone. And this is another thing that people don't know about, is a lot of the midwives, they want a vaginal birth so badly that even when your baby is gone and you do transfer to a hospital, they're telling your doctors not to do a C-section. And they're telling the mother, you're going to push the baby out. Like, do you know how horrible it is already? This mother's like grieving, the mother's whatever, and now you have to push your baby out. And it's like, it just scars you in so many other levels. Like, if a mother wants C-section, give her a freaking C-section. Like, don't make her do that. And I have heard of that. I have friends that I personally know here in Vegas that have had this happen to them. I've met a lot of women that this happened to them. So it is a vaginal birth at all costs. And what cost does it come to? It comes to our babies, and it comes to us. They have this big thing about our rights and our choices and our instincts. But when it comes down to it, they will stab us right in the back when it comes to their birthing. If we don't fit their hashtags of what they want to be like, look at baby got stuck and I was the hero. If we don't fit into what they want to use for their business, they discard us and they hide us. And unfortunately, because we have such a lack of gap of laws, even in New York, even in Florida, and even in California, all the states that license them and regulate them and do all these things, there is such a huge gap of control and actually going after them in the states that actually do like go after them, that nothing's happening. No one's knowing that this is happening to families. Nobody knows. Every so often, one of us pops out and it says our story, and people are like, you didn't do your research, or you knew the risk, or you picked a bad midwife. But all of our midwives know each other. And all of our midwives will go to the courtroom together. And those followers that are there for all the things where you see, it doesn't matter who the attorney is, doesn't matter how many things that they are criminally being charged with, they will follow them to the ends of the earth saying like, nope, home birth is the best. Nope, midwives are the best. This is the best.
So the question of the whole thing, you chose a bad midwife, but the funny thing about those bad midwives is, okay, your midwife actually was cast out somewhat from the sorority of midwifery, but most of the other ones, they must not be bad midwives because they get plenty of support.
Yeah, and see, I think mine, okay, I will tell you a little bit of backstory, kind of what I think kind of happened here. Mine got in trouble down south, moved to California, got in trouble. She got in trouble criminally there, so she couldn't finish getting her license. She couldn't do all her stuff. So she had to move to another state where there was no law. So she came to my state. When she got here, what happened was she was affiliated with all the resources and all the ladies here. So I think in a way they kind of had to kick her out because I was making a big deal about it. I was calling the state board. I was calling the hospital. I was doing all these different things. So since I was making like whatever, the midwives were kind of like, okay, we got to back up here a little bit because we are affiliated, because the head group that's right here in Vegas brought her in, said, come on. And so she did. So the resources from the doctor that I had the C-section, the places that she sent me to for the ultrasound, all of that came from those midwives. So everything can all be dotted together and they all connect. So I think in a way when they were saying, hey, just chill, like, let's just wait a little bit. She didn't want to chill. She didn't want to wait. She was doing her thing. But I think that was kind of like their way of just being like, shh, we got to like keep this quiet. Like we got to like sweep this part under the rug. We got to just let her blow off her steam because she's grieving. And then after she's done talking, we'll kind of just come back out and we'll be friends again. But it didn't turn out that way because I was prosecuting. I started a page for Gavin. All these things started coming out and the truth was just coming out. And so they were like, okay. So she ended up, because of the stuff happened here, she did bankruptcy to get out of court with us. And she had to flee the state basically because if you look her name up, you will find us. You will find us. Even from like before Gatehouse did the story on us, you will still find us. You will find my child's name. I made sure that if I could do anything, my child's name would be following her no matter where she went. So wherever she goes, she has to be very particular about what midwife she wants to hang out with because, you know, they could find you. But that's why when she went to Florida, she changed her name. Now, do some of those midwives know who she is? Yes, they do. They know exactly who she is. I'm sure they've sat and drank whatever they've drank together and been like gabbing over the babies that they've done whatever horrible things to, because they're down in Florida too. But I'm pretty sure listening to Liz, listening to Bambi, listening to Madison, there's a list of mothers' names. We are so connected with our midwives. They literally, some of them had the same mentor. Some of them went to the same school. Some of them have been to the same training places. It's almost scary if you were actually to connect the dots between all of our midwives because we're actually so connected. And it's not just Ina May. I would think it would just be Ina May. No, we're so connected. That's why when one of them gets in trouble, they just link arms. And mine was part of the thing too, where she had a funding for when she was in California. She didn't pay for her legal fees or pay for her lawyer or all this stuff. Even here, it was funded by followers. It was funded by midwives and doulas and the people that are in the natural community. So as much as mine kind of got thrown out, I don't think she really got thrown, because I can tell you right now what they're doing right now in my community is they're putting up YouTube videos about having babies at home for breech and VBAC and twins and all these insane things. And I know about this because I don't like looking them up because it disgusts me because I was in with them. But I get videos and I get people sending me stuff that says, by the way, did you know so-and-so is doing this? And that's what's going on. So I know if my midwife here that I chose that was just connected to them was worried about me having a breech baby and told me, if your baby's breech, we have to get a breech midwife or you're going to go to the hospital. If she was worried about a breech baby, imagine these ones right here are saying, breech babies, we want you all, come to us. The hospital won't let you do it, but we'll do it for you. We'll have it at home. So that's what's really scary. And we're supposed to be having a birth center here, which is just like what you're talking. Okay, birth centers are not a freaking birth center. If there is no doctor at your birth center, it is nothing but a home birth. They buy a space or they rent a space. Maybe it's a house, maybe it's whatever. And literally you might birth there or you're birthing at home and they're just calling it that, but they're not actually a birth center. We have a birth center here that's run by nurse midwives. But if you actually go on their website, they have CPMs there and doulas and just assistants that have no title at all. So, but it says there, we are the only one with nothing but nurse midwives, but they're not all nurse midwives. You can go and look at all their pictures are there. All their stuff is there. And why is this nurse midwife doing it? Unfortunately, the truth is, and I know she was kicked out of the hospital. So therefore she's not allowed to have hospital births. And now she's doing home birth. Why, if you get in trouble in the hospital, why do you think it's okay to do stuff at home? Please, somebody answer. Why is it okay to continue hurting babies, to continue hurting families, babies dying, or doing things like, if you are a bad person, get out of the field, go to
it's all about the money.
The money, yes, and they market them. They market them like boutique hotels. That's how they market. I've seen them advertised. Sometimes my algorithms on Facebook get all from all of this conversation we have and things like that. So I've seen them advertised. And I've just seen them, people have posted in the VBAC group and other things too, and have shared screenshots of the public ones. And I've seen them all over the place from time to time. They really do market these birth centers houses as like they talk about, like, look how they're furnished, look how comfortable, look at these lights and look at this beautiful bed. Basically, like, look how Instagram worthy this birth suite is.
Well, if you live just down the thruway from me, I'm sure that at some point my birth house has shown up in your algorithm, because like the owner is the champion of like social media marketing. She is disgustingly good at the manipulation and using social media to advertise herself as like this truly powerful feminist warrior who is just fighting for the dignity of mothers and birthing people all over. And I remember, like I said, she opened her business the month my daughter was born. I believe I was following her by the end of that month. So I have been on the train of my midwife since she opened. And I remember when she got kicked out of the hospital, how she posted about it and how she made it this long-winded tale of, I do the work I do because doctors won't do this work for you. And I remember her saying along the lines of, if I'm pissing people off this much, I must be doing something right. And at the time, I was very, very, very deep into the vaginal birth at all costs mentality. I had that stereotypical hospital C-section birth with my daughter. I was very disenfranchised. I was very angry, and all of the emotions that lead smart women smart parents into making dumb and dangerous decisions. And I remember reading her post about giving up her rights at the hospital and being like, well, thank God for you. I am thankful that you are willing to make a dumb choice for your business because it is giving you the chance to fight for the births that we all deserve. And then as time goes on, more and more, thankfully, the city of Buffalo is starting to pay attention. This midwife comes literally right on the heels of a different midwife who lost her license. The business opened right around the same time that the other business closed. So Buffalo's kind of been on like this wheel of predatory midwives doing dangerous things. So people are starting to pay attention. But even to this day, my midwife will double down on her confidence. And it just rouses up support no matter where she goes. And she manipulates it into being a situation of fighting for feminist rights.
Mm-hmm. Because that's what it is this is a choice. This is our rights. These are women's rights. We got to link together and we got to stand against the man because the business is trying to take away whatever. But the thing is that they're making more money than doctors are making. They're making more money than the hospital staff are making. And some of them, we can say this, are not claiming taxes. So they're making cash money for lots of things, whatever, where they're literally like there. I'm at this point, and I say this in like the nicest way possible. I guess I could possibly say this. I wish I birthed unassisted. The reason is when I would have hit 41 weeks, I would have been like, this baby's not coming, and I would have went to the hospital. But instead I had some freaking idiot telling me what to do. And I wish I could take that back. And at this point, why spend the thousands of dollars on somebody that's literally doesn't know anything or just going to say, I'm just going to cheer you on. Have your mom tell you that. Have your friend tell you that. Pay them $100 and say, give me a back rub when I'm in labor. At this point, I'm really to that point where I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's my bitter, maybe it's my reality of how much money I spent to literally kill my kid. I don't know. But at this point, it's like, you might as well be by yourself at your home, buy a freaking tub in your own tub, whatever, it's your own germs, not have somebody else come. So they're pointless to me. I really just view them as they're pointless. And they have gone on saying it's all about our rights and our power. But when it comes down to it, they don't give a crap about you. That's the point. They don't care whether you live, whether you die, whether your child lives, whether your child dies. They do not care about your well-being. They don't even check. Some women lose their babies. They don't even check on them afterwards. They don't even give them support.
That was me.